Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Let's Give It a Voice here at the Voice of Hope show with myself, Clarice Angafo. Today, we are having the third episode of a three-part series on bereavement. On our show today, we have Dr. Ako Tabeta, we have Mr. Justin Anguo, and we still have two more guests who are still on the way, Mr. Giddeon Angafo and Mr. Fang Roland. So we started this series on bereavement in July as a way of initiating a conversation around this topic, thereby to raise awareness, to
I
educate,
cannot hear.
to empower, to inspire, and to give hope to any parent who has endured the loss of a daughter or a son at some point in their life. Others may be wondering why July. July is annually recognized as Bereaved Parents Awareness Month,
I,
dedicated
I
to
cannot hear
raising
AC. Is
awareness.
it possible?
You can't hear.
I'm getting you.
Yeah.
You're getting me. Yeah. Can you hear now? Dr. Ako, can you hear? I think you need to check your volume or your speaker. So we started this three-part series on bereavement in July because July is annually recognized as Bereaved Parents Awareness Month, a month dedicated to raising awareness of the support necessary when a parent endures the devastating loss of a child. It is necessary for us all to know that child loss occurs during pregnancy, soon after birth, within the first few years during childhood and adulthood. So no matter at what age a parent loses a child, the pain is still the same and it's still so devastating. During the first episode, as women, we shared our experiences with the loss of a child and we elaborated extensively on some of those words that sometimes people say to you when you've lost a child. They say them with a good heart, but this word unintentionally are somehow harmful. And then during the second episode, we talked about the effects of grief on our mental health. We also looked at some healing words, some of those soothing words that people can say to you when you are going through this difficult moment. And we also looked into how the community of friends or family can support you, the bereaved, during this period. So I just want to welcome all of you for watching. So if you can hear me, you indicate. And then you also, let me add one more guest. Good. So our topic of discussion today is when a man faces grief, the silent cry. When we were discussing as women, we were discussing the first two episodes on this topic. We actually we actually discovered that so many of you men, when you faced grief or the death of a child, you hardly talk about your experiences. You hardly really talk about how you feel because maybe the society wants you to be strong. The society wants you to man up, or sometimes because you want to be strong for the rest of the family. As I said, most men are expected to be strong during bereavement. Does it mean you guys, you do not hurt or you do not grieve? So, you watching, join us. Let's give it a voice to when a man faces grief. It is a
The thing
silent
is, I'm
cry.
struggling to hear AC. I can't hear what she's
Yeah.
saying, so I do not know if I
Uh,
should log out and log back in.
yes, you log out and come back in because I've been speaking, but you seem not to hear. Um, Justin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, that's fine. So we continue while waiting for the rest to. to come in. So on our show today, we have Mr. Justin Angulo. We have Dr. Ako Tabeta, our usual doctor who has been on our show for a while now. We have Mr. Giddeon Angafor, and we have Dr. Mr. Fang Roland, who probably is still on his way. So while we are here now, waiting for Dr. Ako to come in, I would like you guys to introduce yourselves. Let me bring back Dr. Ako. Okay. Can you hear me now, Dr. Ako?
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm hearing you for the first time, actually. So I had to log out and log back in.
Okay, that's fine. So, if you're watching the music, some of the songs we will be listening on this show today, I think I should, Dr. Ako, should I say we have rights to the song because you are the artist behind the song?
Yeah, I'm the artist behind the song, but
good.
you do not have rights to the song, but I give you the permission to play the song.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So, thank you for that. So at some point we will be listening to one of the songs from Dr. Ako, which is called Kolofata. So I know this topic is a very emotional topic. However, we still have to talk about it. Because I know that what we give a voice to has the power to heal us and also heal those around us. And somehow I think the more we talk about grief, the more we talk about bereavement, it also makes it less emotional. It makes it a topic less sensitive for everyone to talk about. So I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Justin Anguo to introduce himself.
Thanks, Clarice, as I fondly call you now. Thanks for inviting me. I was a bit reluctant because I don't really like to come out on platforms like this. I always like to stay very discreet, and but however, I thought this was a topic that actually I've experienced and have actually touched me. So I thought, well, let me come out and share my own little experience. As you say, my name is Justin Ango. I live in Luton. Others who are from Com who knows a bit of our culture, like Conundrum there, he'll know that I'm a Bonjong.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's sitting there without his title cap on his head, but that's a discussion for another another day.
Yeah.
So, so thanks very much, Clarice, for inviting me. I hope I'll be able to share my own little but limited experience in this journey of because I think it's something that's ongoing based on my experience, the things that will remind me of it throughout days. But thank you very much.
Mhm. You're welcome. Thank you so much, Bonjong. I should have called you that way. Well, you have so many titles, and one of them is Boles. All right, over to you, Dr. Anko, and
Yeah.
welcome once more. And thank you so much for honoring our invite again to our show. You're welcome.
You're welcome, Clarice. It's such a fantastic show, and it's always a privilege, to share important things, which oftentimes society neglects in certain parts of the world, like where we come from in Africa. Things like grief, prolonged grief, the way, the knowledge, attitude, and practice of grief, among women and among men in different parts of the world. So, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that we are being joined by many people are seeing the essence and the importance of talking about these things, which have been talked about in different parts of the world, but not in Africa. So, it's important to see black people, from Africa come out, male and female, and talk about grief, clinical grief. I am Ako, Dr. Ako. I run the day program in Massachusetts Avenue in Washington, D.C., mental health with MBI Health Services. I prepared a curriculum for mental health according to the Department of Behavioral Health guidelines in the United States. We are the biggest mental health agency in the United States of America. I also train staff on clinical interventions in mental health, the knowledge, acting practice of mental health, in medication management, and also occurring disorders, which is the relationship between substance abuse and mental illness. And then I facilitate group therapeutic sessions with men in the Central Union Mission in Massachusetts Avenue. And I also work at different branches of NBI Health Services. I also consult in the area of mental health. So that is what I do as a profession. I graduated medical school from University of Jos, Nigeria. And I've been working in the United States. I'm also an artist by choice and talent. And it's just a passion that is beginning to kick in, and I'm beginning to feel some good vibes all over the place, So I try to do that. Music is my coping skill. Yes, I use music as a coping skill because we all need one, sooner or later. And I'm privileged to be on your show. AC, I'm looking forward to a very important discussion that is going to open up the mind of people and create more awareness to mental health. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ako. And thank you guys for watching. If you're just joining in, you are live on the Voice of Hope show with Clarice Angafor. And today our topic of discussion is when a man faces grief, the silent cry. So let's pass over to the man of the house. Dr. Ako, you understand why I said the man of the house. Over to you. Over to you, Boles.
Yeah, greetings everyone. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Giddeon Angafu. I am based in Basingstoke in the UK. What can I say about myself? I'm a husband, father, and a parent. And as Bonjong already alluded to that, traditionally I am Conundrum, which is a pathfinder, loosely translated, the ambassador of His Royal Highness the Fawn of Bamboo here in the UK. And yes, I accept that I don't have my traditional cap on, which that one is something that Bonjong is going to crucify me for. And ultimately, I am the husband to the host, as she alluded to being the man of the house.
Thank you so much. We were supposed to be 5 of us today. Hopefully our next guest is still on his way, but we will have to continue while he's still coming in. Thank you so much for the introduction. And if you're joining us, share and invite your friends to join in, because this is a very important topic, which most often people, families, friends, the society at large, they expect us or those who have faced it to bury this topic under the carpet, under the pillow, and not to talk about it. As inevitable as death is, and as painful as it can be, it still has to be talked about. When we talk about it, the emotions that surround the death of a child become less emotional, they become less sensitive, and the pain lessens. So while we are waiting for others, just a little bit of Kolofata by Dr. Ako, and then we continue. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. So this song was released.
A little bit of Kolofata by Yangi. Not Dr. Ako, Yangi.
Okay,
Yangi.
thanks for the correction. All right, yeah. So this song was released. So this song was released on the 3rd of July 2020 by Yangi Nation. So we thank you so much, Dr. Ako, for giving us the right to play the song on our show today. So we continue. Now, if you're just joining us once more, our topic of discussion today is when a man faces grief, the silent cry. Why the silent cry? Because we know that in as much as when a woman loses a child, she hurts, she goes through those roller coaster of emotions. The man also goes through those emotions, but at times more concentration is on the woman. Maybe because she was carrying that, she is the one who carried that child in her for 9 months, or maybe because of the direct connection that the woman has with the child. However, the man or the woman, we all grieve, and we grieve in different ways. So our guest speakers today have different experiences with the loss of a child. And I said earlier that the loss of a child can occur during pregnancy, shortly after pregnancy, in childhood, or even in adulthood. So that's why we brought up this topic, and we're talking about bereavement because July is annually recognized as a Bereaved Parents Awareness Month. And today is the last episode of this three-part series on bereavement. And so we dive into the questions or into our discussion. So, Mr. Anguo, I would like to start with you. What is your experience with child loss?
Oh, that is an experience that I don't think I will forget because there's so many things that bring back the memories, life. Uh, it was a very sad experience when I look at the events leading up to what happened, and it was just so sudden that I was standing there lost. And if anybody could ask me what was going on around me, I was confused. I could see nurses and doctors rushing around the place. And what's happening? And when I looked at the child lying next to my wife, I did not even have the courage to look at her. My sister in law was sitting there. She came in, carried the child. I wandered out of the word because it was just too much for me to take. And a few days after, even while we're still in the hospital, you got these nurses coming in, people coming in, and all the attention was going to my wife. It reached a stage I had to ask all the nurses, hang on, I've also lost a child. It's not only her. That's when they thought, oh, they went and brought me books on bereavement and stuff to read. But I'm telling you, that did not help because I was experiencing that pain. And I pretended to stay strong for my wife, but I was feeling the pain because for 4 years I didn't want to stand there and be crying next to her because it was just going to make things difficult. So thankfully, they gave me a little side room in the hospital where I used to go in there, lock myself, then I live through that experience. And I think it's an experience that will live with me throughout my life because there are so many things that remind me of day. Not so much in a negative way today, but
Okay.
I'm happy that at some stage I had to come to terms with that. But I must say it was not an easy experience because I had to call friends that very evening to tell them, look, this is what has happened. And I thought I was strong. When I called friends and started talking to them, I discovered I was crying. I was like,
Yeah.
come on, this is not me, you know. So it was an easy experience to go through.
hmm So that's um. I'll go over to Gideon. Would like to hear about your experience with child loss.
As my friend and brother Justin said earlier on, it's not a good experience. And having gone through it twice, it's something that I would not wish for anyone. And as he said earlier on, the first time when it happened, I was actually in a classroom. And when I had that call, I was confused. And especially when you are in front of students, most of them who were grown enough to actually understand that something is not right, they could tell when I was called out and told that there's something not right. And the second experience was the most. It still resonates with me at the moment because he passed away in my arms, and it was very difficult for me, even going back into the hospital and going into that room, because it felt like I was just going in to pick him up and hold him. And when things like that happen, especially the fallbacks from that, because we've had to live with that for the last few years, and I guess it's going to be forever. So it is an experience which is really, really, if I can use the word dreadful, it is.
Thank you. Dr. Ako, I'll
Yes.
come over to you, and I'll just like to let us know one of the reasons I asked Dr. Ako to be a special guest on our show today is because we would like him to look into how grief affects a man's mental health, right, Dr. Ako?
Right.
So, because and I'm not sure you've experienced the loss of a child. You may have experienced the loss of someone, but I'm not sure. Am I right?
You're right, and I've not
Okay.
experienced the loss of a child, and
Okay.
yes, and I just want to extend, my condolences to Justin and Giddeon for the loss. It might be a while ago, but it is something which is ever present in our memories, and I must confess that I've lost, other members, in the family, and
Mhm.
I believe that we all deal with that, with grief, a
Yeah.
way of relating to loss of someone who was very close to us. In your case, in
Mm-hmm.
the case of, Justin and Giddeon, it was their child, and I'm just going to be frank. I will not pretend I understand what you went through. Yes, yes. The
Yeah.
first thing I want to say
All right.
about that, Clarice, is we all grieve differently as human
Yeah.
beings. You know,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're a man or a woman, all men will grieve
Mm-hmm.
differently, and
Yeah.
women will grieve differently. So to start with, men grieve differently from women, for many reasons. But even among women, women will grieve different, and among men, men will grieve differently, because we
Yeah.
come with different personalities, and we come with different attitudes and different behaviors, and we grow up under different environmental circumstances. Now,
Yes.
another thing that will make people to grieve differently will be the nature of the death, and the way the person died. Now, those are very important, because the who died, and it's very important. How close were they to you? Was it a wife? Was it a
Mm.
son? Was it a daughter? Was it a brother, a cousin? Was it a friend? And it also
Yeah.
depends on the emotional attachment with the person you lost. All right. I remember a song.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a doctor. I'm also an artist, and some of the things I learned a lot, through music. I heard when Tupac Shakur, the rapper, back in the days when he
Yeah.
was singing his song "Mama," trying to really appreciate his mom. He talked about his father. He said he passed away, and I couldn't cry, because my anger could not make me feel for a stranger. I could not cry because my anger could not make me feel for a stranger. Now, I heard that song many years ago, but when I came to the field of mental health, I began to look into the words, those lyrics. Even though his father died, I was like, how could somebody's father die? And then he said his anger could not make him feel for a stranger. It means a lot. That was his
Mm-hmm.
father, but they were disconnected. They had no relationship. And yet he had to grieve in a certain way. He talked about anger, and talking about not being willing to feel for a stranger, even though it was his father. you know. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
That connection is very important. How was the relationship? And
Yeah.
under what circumstances? It's a traumatic
Mm-hmm.
experience to lose someone, but there are various degrees of trauma. And how traumatic that event can be is going to translate into how you try to handle it in life, whether short term
Yeah.
or long term.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
Clarice, grief is really important. We grieve differently. And is there a timeline? I just want to first mention that when we do not grieve well, we get into what we call prolonged grief. But the DSM
Yeah.
5, classification, mental health does not categorize prolonged grief as a mental illness. Not yet. Yes, because we
Oh.
have to stay on the clinical aspect of it. It does not classify. I was surprised when I read
Okay.
it because you will think that prolonged grief with all its complications could be classified as a mental illness. It's not. So, but that
Mm-hmm.
notwithstanding, it consists of many components that are worth talking
Yeah.
about. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you so much. Then I'll have to go back to Justin, and what really goes on within
Yeah.
you when or what really went on within you when you stood there, you looked at baby Rose, and what did you feel about yourself and the baby while they were there during that moment? I mean, like
It
in
was a
in the
big
heat,
step.
in yeah, in the heat of the moment, what goes on within you?
No, I thought she was going to come back alive. I
Mm.
thought no, she's not dead. There's a mistake here,
Yeah.
and this feeling really intensified because we were actually waiting for her.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually waiting for her. So I was standing there hoping that uh, the doctors or the nurses would give me a different result, but it didn't change. And that's when the pain actually went deeper because I could not even gather the courage to look at her, let alone
Mm-hmm.
carry her. And the best at that moment was to kind of run away from that situation and pretend as if it didn't happen. But it was right there in front of me. It was right there in front
Mm-hmm.
of me. So how was I going to run away from myself? It was later on that I gathered the courage, came back, and stood there, just look at her. Even the whole of that evening, I was hoping that by the following morning, they'll give me a different result, or maybe you know was a mistake. Uh, she's fine. She'll be, but that was just an illusion in my mind. It never happened. So it was
Yeah.
a painful experience. And to add to that, one of the reasons that actually made me walk out was the agony I saw my wife going through. So to put together, I don't know the pain she was experiencing, and looking at the bureau lying next to her, and the type of incantation she was going through, the type of things she was saying, it was just too much for me to handle. So I was like, what? No, let me go outside and get some fresh air.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that easy, but I was in that process of actually, I was in denial that it hasn't happened, hoping that I'll get a
Yeah.
different outcome. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
it didn't. It didn't change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was how I felt at that moment. You
Okay.
know,
Thank you so much for
and and,
that.
and that's
And me,
I think that's why even when you guys had a similar experience, I remember we were there, and I remember I had an exchange with you. You thought I was a bit harsh because I knew what I'd gone through, and I knew, hang on, this is a moment that you don't want to miss because from my experience, I thought I missed a lot of moments that I could have handled things differently,
Mm-hmm.
because even the moment that I felt bad because the opportunity was there for me to actually hold her in my arms, but I didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't because I was so shocked. I don't know, I was frightened. I don't know what was going through me because even when I left the hospital to drive home, I drove past our exit and I was driving down towards London. I don't know what I was going to do down there. you know,
Wow.
why was I even
Yeah.
trying to drive at that time? So I thought there was a there which, in hindsight, I missed. But can I ever get it back? No.
Mm.
But I'm going to live with that. Maybe I'll make sense out and in future. So you sure that's how I actually felt at that moment. Sometimes it's so hard to articulate that feeling at that particular moment, but it's intense. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would really like to appreciate all of you for coming onto the show today to talk about this topic, grief, bereavement. This is something I've planned, I've wanted for a very long time for us, for everyone to get a conversation going around some of these topics, which are they are so emotional, yes, but we still need to talk about them either in the community, as friends, or as families. So if you're just joining us, we are on the Voice of Hope show with Clarice Angafor, and we are giving a voice to when a man faces grief, the silent cry. So you invite your friends and let's watch together. And if you're watching, you've experienced the loss of a child at some point in your life. It doesn't matter how young that child was. It doesn't matter the gestation period. That was still the loss of a baby. Tell us your experience in the comments box. Sharing is healing, and what you give a voice to has the power to change your life. It has the power to heal you and heal others around you. I'd like to pass to go over to Gideon. What really went on within you that day when you came in, you saw the baby, and when you held David J's in your arm, how did you feel?
If I can sum that up in one word, it would be lost, completely lost. Because first and foremost, he came earlier than expected. That in itself knocked us off our feet. And secondly, when I held him in my arms and cuddled him, he could breathe, and my prayer, I was silently praying and hoping that he survived, because we'd been through a similar experience of early birth, and he's a towering young lad, and my prayer was for him to come home with us, even if it meant that he would be on oxygen for quite a while. But when it happened, I was completely lost, and for moments I didn't know what was going on. And like Justin, Clarice, my wife, was going through pain, a lot of pain. She had to be rushed to the theater as well. But in as much as all of that was going on, I was worried about her life, but also completely lost about what was happening and the fact that a lot of this happened so soon. So it's an experience of utter shock, but completely lost, and not really being able to put a handle on what was going on.
Mhm. Oh, thank you so much. And guys, you are watching. So when you experience the loss of a child, sometimes you can't really put words to how you are feeling. From what our men have said, you feel lost. You are confused. You don't actually know what you are thinking at that particular moment. And the devastating thing in it at that moment is that they are grieving their child as well as they are grieving the grief of their wife, because at the moment they're not too sure what the wife is going through or what the rest of the family is going through. And as the man, they've got to carry all of that. They've got to bear that burden as well. So once more, I really want to thank all of you for opening up and sharing your experience about this topic. And we are talking about bereavement, when a man faces grief, the silent cry. When a parent endures the loss of a child at any age, the pain is quite unbearable, as we've heard. These are some of the moments where we really need our friends and our loved ones around us to console us, to condole with us. What During this moment, what are your expectations as far as friends, family, and the rest of the community are concerned? Expectations in terms of what you would like your friend or the closest person to you, or your siblings or your parents. What would you like them? What would you think they will say that will make you feel better, even though you are in a very difficult position? Again, Justin, I will start with you.
For me, it's very simple. My expectation was to be left alone because I felt I just needed that space. You know, people were around me trying to say, "Oh, it's okay, stay strong. It's the will of God." Uh, Come on, at that time, none of those things make any sense. Why is
Yeah.
the will of God that a baby should die?
Yeah.
Why is it the will of God? You're telling me stay strong. I'm feeling pain. You're telling me it will be okay. How will it be okay? The only thing was to be okay was to bring back a child. So you're telling me it will be okay, stay strong. No, all I needed was because too much of those instead made me angry because they were meaningless. All those words were meaningless to me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm there going through that pain. So I just wanted to find a place and be there on my own and go through that experience because I had to internalize it. And with too much noises around me, everybody is trying to give me their own best advice. No advice at the time was good enough for me. And if it alone made me more angry because all the
Mm-hmm.
things were meaningless. I know from their own point of view, they were doing their best to try to reach out to me, to try to console me. But from my perspective, those were
Yeah.
empty words to me. So all I needed was a space to be on my own and
Mm-hmm.
internalize that experience and through it and accept it without those too much noises. So to say nothing anybody said to me was good enough, nobody should take offense, but that's how I felt at that moment. And that was
Yeah.
my experience as an individual.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I hope everyone watching, and if you remember that year, yes, in the heat of the moment, no matter what someone says to you, it doesn't mean anything, because what you want to hear is that the baby is alive, is that the baby comes back. But we
Yeah.
still appreciate the efforts that these people
Oh, yeah.
put in to support us during this period. And whatever thing they say at the moment, at that moment, you feel really, really sad, and you're going through denial, and anger comes in as well. So I would like to hear from Giddeon. What about you? What were your expectations?
I agree with a lot of the things that my brother Justin there said.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to add that apart from just telling people God is in control and things like those, it is important actually to find out from me to say, how can I help? What do you think I can do? Because it's in that moment when one is confused, lost, and in denial, especially in cases where that person may have other siblings to look after, it is important for friends and family to say, what can I do? How can I
Yeah.
help? For me, that was one of those experiences where, in a number of cases, I would have actually loved that. But it's also good not to judge, because for some people, they will judge you. It's part of human instinct that people will assume that you are doing this and that, and for some, so one or two comments that we heard was, it's you are not the first and you are not going to be the last, which is really really annoying, as my brother Justin said.
That's so helpful.
But it's important for someone to recognize that I am me. I need that moment to grieve and to say, is there a way I can help, rather than prescribing and saying, God is in control. It happened for a good reason, and increase the hurt, and really not making it helpful or encouraging for me in particular.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, thank you once more for watching. You are listening. What was your experience? What did you expect from your friends and your family when if you've lost a child? You've heard from our guest speakers. At times, you need to ask someone how they are feeling. You need to ask them what you can do to help. You don't have to assume, and no judgment, because it happened to 1,000 people out there. It doesn't make it less painful. The pain is still the same, no matter how many people have experienced the loss of a child. So I would like to come to go over to Dr. Ako. We are also going to talk about the support that's needed when a parent loses a child, how friends and family and other family members or the community, how they can support a parent, especially the dad, because we are talking about men and grief today. So before we get into what can be done to support the dad when he loses a child, Dr. Ako, we come over to you, so to talk about the effects of grief on one's mental health, because we know the loss of a loved one can impact the survivor's mental and physical health. I also read that in Mental Health America, a national advocacy group, it says prolonged grief can trigger anxiety attacks and depression. So, how does grief affect a parent's mental health? What are the long-term effects of prolonged grief on a parent's mental health? I don't actually know what prolonged grief is.
Yes.
So
Uh,
over to you, Dr.
yes.
Aku.
Thank you, Clarice. I'm sorry, I was trying to hear what the question was not very clear, but I think I got it.
Mhm.
As I mentioned prior, grief is a very complicated thing to understand when it comes to men. You see, the first thing I want to talk about is we are dealing with a culture, and this is African culture. If you lose someone, I like to be practical. I'm going to just break it down the way it is. If we lose someone within the African culture, we have titled men here. Uh, the community is going to show up at your place, and they're going to sit with you and talk with you and try to commiserate with you and trying to encourage you. They're going to get some drinks, and folks are going to show up so that you're not alone. That is a bit different from other cultures. So that is already one important thing. I have to introduce this first because we are Africans, and that way you're not alone, and how you're going to cope with it. We have a very strong social structure when it comes to encouraging each other. Now, back to men. Women grieve different from men, different way from men. That is why we're going to have a few things down the line to talk about. Women grieve by talking about it and by crying, by shouting. Men do not grieve that way, you know. And that is the first thing I want to mention here. The woman is the more emotional one. She's the one who is going to express these emotions. Men grieve by thinking about it and by acting. Those are two important components. So, Giddeon and Justine, I'm sorry for your loss, but if you remember, you thought a lot and you acted a lot, and the female around you cried, they shouted, they talked about it more. It stems from the way the man was brought up to believe that he has to man up to everything that happens in life. You don't have to express emotions. because expressing emotions is considered as weakness. You can't cry. It is something that's so deeply rooted in our culture and our society. We believed it as we grew up, we embraced it, and now we begin to portray it in various facets of our lives, our attitudes and behavior, including grief. That's important. So that's the difference, between that man and woman. It's very complicated to understand where a man is when he's grieving. You could see his face. His face will be neutral, expressionless. He's not tearful. Does not imply he's not going through a lot of emotions. You see, everything is stored in there. Everything is locked in. There's a lot going on in the mind. But the woman is not like that. She's rolling over the floor. She's crying. They're hugging each other. It's a whole thing that goes on. All right. So the mental conundrum that accompanies grief, whether it is short-term or long-term, is quite complex, And the first thing I'm going to say is in 1969, Ross classified grief into 5 stages, And when we understand those 5 stages of grief, we are going to understand how things go down the line, And he said the first stage was denial, and the second stage was anger, then you have depression, then you have
Bargaining.
bargaining, and then finally you have acceptance. Now, I want to mention that these 5 stages of grief must not go through that sequence for everybody. Yeah, it is different for different people. But what we do know is I heard the term confusion when we lost someone. It is one of the elements of the first stage of grief, which is denial. Because when somebody dies, the first thing is that there is this confusion, there is fear, there is a numbness. It happened. I was with him yesterday. How could that happen? This is unbelievable. There is that confusion, there is fear, there is numbness. Yes, and then there's some level of avoidance, almost as if you don't want to touch on the subject. You're hoping it's not true, and you're going to no, that didn't happen, because you are running away from that reality to try to accept something else, as if taking your mind from this, like this is a dream, it's not happening. That avoidance goes on. It's a very painful process. It's like your whole world crumbled and everything changed, and it is so intense. That denial stage is huge, and how men process that is different. Because at that moment, this is man, his makeup, his emotional state is for him to be macho. The testosterone kicks in, and the cultural background of the African man, is you have to be stoic and you have to be strong. Now the man is not going to be shouting in the house and screaming. At that first stage of grief, it is a woman screaming. So there is a lot going on, and that is where we're supposed to have some mental distortion along the line for men, because some men do not handle that stage very well. Some men get stuck at the first stage of grief, which is denial. And what happens is that 4 or 5 years later, there are some men who are still at the state of denial because it was so painful, and they do not still accept that it happened. I had one of my clients, and he was grieving so much. He gave the son a cigarette and some money to go buy cigarettes across the street, and there was a stray bullet, a stray bullet from a gun, and the son was dead. Very traumatic. And he abused alcohol to cope with that. And when he talks about it many years later, you begin to feel the pain, and he blames himself for it a lot. And you see, I can't believe it happens, because the whole thing is, if I did not give my son that money to buy the cigarettes, he will still be alive today. And that is where you come to explain that, look, it was not your fault, because you could not understand the dynamics in every fraction of a second in your life. You are not in control of that. Anything could happen. It is not your fault that you gave your son money to go buy cigarettes across the street. He could feel that if
Yeah.
I wasn't smoking, he would still be alive today. Now, I've just moved from the first stage to the third stage, which is bargaining, trying to reason, trying to look for a reason why. He's bargaining, you know. So that first stage denial is very important. How did he cope with the first stage denial? You know. Now we move to the second stage, which is anger. That stage of anger is very common with men. You see, men react to stress different from women. Women cry when they react to stress. Men get angry when they react to stress. Men get frustrated when they react to stress. This is a very important stage when it comes to men. Some men get very angry with the world. They got stuck at the stage of anger. You see men with prolonged grief, they're angry with the world, they're angry with everybody. Their personality changed. He used to be a good guy and he used to be so nice and warm to everybody until he lost somebody close to him. The mental state begins to get affected at that level. And they were talking about depression, where some people get depressed, they become helpless. And, you know, they get withdrawn, they don't know how to handle it. It's a really tough experience. People who lose someone very close, they get to that stage. Yeah, I've talked about it, and then that bargaining stage I mentioned, and then finally the acceptance. If men go through this stage or women go through this stage, it's normal, all right? It's normal to be in denial, to be in avoidance, you know, and stuff. It is normal to be angry. It is normal to be angry. You're going through a series of stages, you know. It's normal to be depressed. Grief is a normal process. It's not an abnormal process. It is normal to grieve. It is not abnormal to grieve. It becomes abnormal when that grief is prolonged. And prolonged grief, what is prolonged grief? It's difficult to set a timeline because the amount of time you grieve depends on the nature of the grief, on the etiology of the grief, then the risk factor, the trigger for the grief, how the person died, where, and you know, under what conditions, how close the person was. So we all grieve differently. Yeah, we all grieve differently. So it's a little bit complex. But for that grief to be prolonged to such a point where it begins to affect your mental health, affects your life, affects the life of all the people around you, that is something that we have to look into. That is where we're going like, okay, at what stage of grieving did he find difficult to cope? Is it at the denial stage, which would affect his mental health in a different way? Is it at the anger stage? Is it at the bargaining stage? As I mentioned before, some people get stuck at the stage of bargaining. If I had sent my mother the $100 she asked last week, she would not have traveled to borrow money to go to the village. Because I did not send $100 last week, she had to travel to borrow money, and it's while she traveled to borrow money that she had an accident. That is what made her to die. Now, these are now, these things I'm spelling out, people don't talk about it, but it goes through their mind.
Yeah.
And men are good at thinking. Men struggle with grief, and we mentioned suicide on this, and this is very important. We mentioned suicide on this platform in one of our shows, AC, and we talked about women contemplate suicide more than men, but men carry out the acts more than women.
Yeah.
And prolonged grief is an etiological factor for depression and for suicide. So men think a lot, they don't talk about it, then the man kills himself because he grieves so much, he does not talk. He acts. Men act on things. A man loses his father, the women are crying, he is thinking about continuing his father's legacy. So while people are mourning, he is busy. After the community comes and visits them, they travel to the village, they are on top of things. They are the ones to organize things to make sure everything is fine. They make sure that everything is in order. People are grieving, the die house and the rest. Is he grieving properly? You see, and when the whole thing is over, what is his mindset? He thinks. And then people are going to come to him, oh, you're strong. We thank you for being strong. If the man wants to cry, they're going to say, if you are crying, who is going to comfort your sisters? Who is going to comfort that? I'm talking about the reality of, grief in our community. Yeah. Who is going to comfort? If you are the one crying, who is going to comfort the rest? This is real. So, but the man is there to comfort. And then everybody goes home. Nobody knows what the man is thinking. It's important that those around the man should understand these dynamics on how to approach him, on how to comfort him. The man wants to be left alone. Men want to be left alone. Men don't want to be encompassed into or to be surrounded or any pressure. They want to be left alone to deal with it in a still way. They think and then they act. And
Yeah.
that action is very important. So we all grieve differently, and I'm encouraging men to be open to the fact that it is a normal process to grieve, to feel that pain. It is okay to cry. It's okay to
Yeah.
express that feeling. If you don't want to do it in the open, do it where nobody's seeing you, but cry. Let it out. Do not store it
Mm-hmm.
in. It can be very damaging. It can be very devastating long term. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ako, for that elaborate explanation, and especially the fact that you touched Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model of grief, which as denial, acceptance, bargaining, depression, and denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, which is very necessary. Those are emotions which we all go through when we are grieving, but it doesn't mean
Right.
that these emotions go are in a linear process. They
Right.
don't, because at times you can actually start with acceptance, then you find yourself going back to denial. As at times it goes in a it's a vicious circle, it just goes round. But we all have to be mindful of our mental health as well, especially with the men, as we are discussing today. It's very necessary that you talk about what you are going through. And Dr. Akpo has also pointed out that women breathe different from the men. So we've already been on the show for 57 minutes, and we usually aim for an hour or an hour 15 minutes. So we
Okay.
continue. Yeah, we continue. We are going to look at which type of support can those around you, as a man who has lost a child, which support can we give you? I know at the beginning, Justin, you mentioned that while Sister Emma was still in the hospital with the baby beside her, at some point you felt alone, you felt isolated. Which support can do you expect to be given to you during that period? Let's start right from the hospital, the doctors, the midwives, then back home to the closest family members, then in the wider community. If at times people cannot help because they do not know exactly what to say or what to do, or because you guys as the men, you don't actually show how you feel within. Sometimes it makes it difficult. So on our show today, we are willing to hear, to learn, and to know what can be done to help you guys when you are grieving.
Uh, Going back from what I said to the beginning from the hospital, I think it's necessary to recognize that the man has equally lost a child.
Yeah.
I understand why the attention is all focused on the woman. She's going through that emotional pain, she's going through that physical pain, but you, the man, you have equally lost a child. That should
Mm-hmm.
be recognized because
Yeah.
if that's not recognized, you feel isolated, you feel alone, you start blaming yourself. Because I mean, there was a situation I was asking myself questions. Why, as Dr. Ako was rightly saying there, what is it that I did not do right to lead to that situation? I was trying to look for reasons to blame myself. And
Mm-hmm.
even when we came back home, we had the health official. And I remember one time she was telling me one of the health officials were asking her whether I was abusive to her during pregnancy. Can you imagine when I'm still going through that process of grief and somebody's finding out whether he was abusive to you? That did not help. When I heard that, I thought, you know what, I might not even want to come back here again. That's what she's thinking. You know, that was not helpful. But I think just to give us the space to process those feelings. it's very important
Yeah.
because space for me, that's what I thought, that's what I found very helpful. I just needed the time of where I could be quiet and just process those thoughts and within myself without
Mm-hmm.
people saying lots of things around me that actually did not make any sense. And I think just being there, because I had friends who just came by sad. They were not specifically saying anything to me about, oh, you'll be well, you'll be fine. We just chatted. And I found that a bit, I was the one who started talking about it. As Dr. Riley said, that to talk about it, I think I don't have much problem within that domain because I talked about it to friends, I talked about it to family, and we even talked about it with my wife, and I found that helpful talking about it, acknowledging what went through. But does that necessarily take away the pain? No. It will be there for some time, but talking about it, it's helpful and giving someone that space without giving them too much unnecessary information at that time. It's quite helpful. So I think that's one of the areas which I think it could be of great help to. Well, it was of help to me. I don't know how to others because, as Dr. Riley said, we go through this process in our own different
Yeah.
ways based on our own based on our own personalities. But actually, having that
Mm-hmm.
space, when I had the opportunity to share with somebody to talk about it, I did, and I found that healing. And I also, within the period where I had the space to think about it, reflect about it, I also looked at things that I could have done differently when it
Okay.
happened.
Yeah. We
And
are
going
we
through
are
that
still going
process,
to come
thinking
to that.
about,
We are going to
yeah,
come to
okay,
that.
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I think for
But
me, basically two things was given that space and
yeah.
talking about it and
Okay.
not listening to too much information at that particular time because I didn't find that too much talking so helpful to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Gideon. While you went to sort out Les, we were just discussing on his. Yeah. So Gideon, over to you. We're discussing on the support that a man will need when he's lost a child, either from let's say starting from the hospital, from the doctors, the midwives, the nurses, back to the family, closest family, and then the entire community. What do you think is the necessary support that can be given to you as the man or as the dad during that period? What is it that could help, or what was it that could have helped?
It's one of those that I can talk about till the cows come home, but it's difficult to prescribe because circumstances are different.
Mm-hmm.
In my own circumstances, I felt at some point that I was completely ignored. I was a non-entity as far as some of the staff in hospital were concerned, especially the nurses, and a lot of the times. Fair enough. My wife was quite unwell after that and needed to go into the theater, but sometimes I felt that I was just there, just another person. And it would be important actually for medical personnel to recognize that the man in such a situation is also part of the equation. I already mentioned about the looking after siblings. We were quite fortunate in the sense that
It's breaking.
that part of and
Yeah.
the entire family from Luton who came down, but also part of the community around us here were very, very helpful. Some of the ladies made food because. But one of the things that I really felt that could have been very helpful would be to, as we said before, having time to myself. I didn't have a lot of that, and Dr. Ako, you would be glad to know that I cried. I'm not one of those who bottles up a lot of those. There were times that I actually cried, even if it was turning myself away to cry because and some of the periods and the fact that Clarice was in such pain, and I tried in a number of occasions if I could avoid going to the hospital because of the hurt and the anger and not wanting to accept what was going on, I could have done that. But yes, I cried. I was able to struggle through that, but I would have loved for someone, if it were possible, to just say, let me look after the boys for an hour or so that you can have time to recuperate, which I'm sure for some in my situation it will be very helpful. And about the talking, it's one of those things that I don't shy away from talking about that. I would appreciate friends as well to be with you, recognize that you are going through grief, but without actually trying to letting you be you, if I can put it that way, without trying to prescribe how I have to act and what I would have to do and that. I would appreciate.
Line is breaking. Are you okay? All right. We
Line is breaking.
Time served.
Mhm. Okay. Just we are just heading down to the last part of our show, and then we are going to round up with Dr. Ako. So now, Justin, I know, as we said, death is inevitable. At times, you don't know when it can happen. All right, Gideon, if you're back, then just conclude what you were saying. Then before I move on, you okay? Okay. What I wanted to ask Justin, if you were to go through the same experience of losing a child today, what would you do differently? Or another part of the question is, what would you say to a parent who has lost a child? What if a friend calls you tomorrow, a brother or a sister tells you that this is the situation I am in? Well, from your experience, what would you do?
I think from my experience, the first thing I regret is that I did not spend much time with her that evening.
Mhm.
Looking at it now from hindsight, I should have spent enough time with her, which I didn't. And maybe because
Mhm.
I was overwhelmed by that experience,
Yeah.
at the moment, because the time spent at that time, I have I have an image of her. I know how she looked like. I have an image of her face, but I wish I could have spent more time with her because
Mm-hmm.
so I try to make up for it sometime along the line, but it's
Yeah.
different. It's different, and it
Mm-hmm.
actually helped because the burial came after 3 weeks, so it gave me some time to put things in place which I could have done within that time, and which I tried to execute
Mm-hmm.
them during the burial to make up for the time that I could have spent with her. But I
Yeah.
think spending time and at that particular moment is very very important. That's something
Mm-hmm.
I think could have done differently. That's the only thing I think I could have done differently at that time.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you so much for
And I
that.
think face with that
I'll just.
situation, face with that situation, spend more time.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, Gideon, over to you. Based on your experience, what would you say to a parent who calls you and tells you that they've lost a child? Or if you face that similar experience, what would you do differently?
I've already alluded to the fact that if I had that experience, what I would like is for someone to give me the space to
Yeah.
be me and grieve the way I'm grieving, but also to ask what they can do to help,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because that would be good for me, because I had the experience of people trying to tell me what I should do. As I said, just pray, it's going to be fine. It's not going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's a few years now and it's still not fine because the hurt is still there. So it's about
And how you should feel.
trying to see how they can help, but also agreeing with Justin there. It's your child. It's actually accepting that you this is part of you, part of the family that's not going to go away, and it's about celebrating that child, naming that child, and remembering them as part of the family, because it's not something that is going to go away. It's something that is going to be part of you.
The network seems to be breaking. Yes, as Gideon said, it's necessary to recognize that a dad has to grieve. Give them that chance, give them that space to be able to grieve. And as Justin said as well, that it's also good to talk about it. And it's also very important for the medical personnel to not ignore the dad while they are at the hospital, because in as much as the mom is going through the pain, both physical and emotional, the dad as well is also going through some form of some form of pain at that moment. All right. Gideon, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
And
Just round up
sorry,
what you were
sorry.
saying, then we'll get. Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, which I think that's about what we've done so far to keep her memory alive in a
Yeah.
positive way is that we get her a good burial. And before this COVID-19, every Sunday when we go to church,
Mm-hmm.
after Mass, we go to the graveside as a family
Mm-hmm.
and say a prayer. And in
Mm-hmm.
that way, we keep the memory alive and active and more in a positive way. Because though she is lying there in the cemetery, we still consider her part of the family in everything we
Yeah.
do. We do recognize her,
Mm-hmm.
and those are positive memories because we did not have the opportunity to spend time with her. You could have these memories how we played with her. We didn't have those
Yeah.
memories because
Yeah.
later they don't give us a chance. So that's how we kept our memory alive by doing that before this COVID-19, and we make sure that we stop in there from time to time, maintain the grave, stand there, and say prayer.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. And we will always remember Baby Rose. She's a big sister.
Oh yeah.
Lesra, Akini, and David Jay's big sister. So we remember them anytime possible because they are still part of the family. And to you, Gideon, before I move over to Dr. Ako to give us a final word as far as the mental health is concerned, do you have any final word to say? Gideon, are you there? Okay. To you, Dr. Ako. Any?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Clarice.
Yeah.
To, I mean, something I can't really hear you, but I will guess you're asking me if anything I have to say. Finally, this is
Yeah.
it's very tough for men, just like everybody else, to deal with grief, and we deal with grief differently. What I have to say is we have to realize the impact of the grief. All right, we are like
Mm-hmm.
men tend to defer to logic when something happens. Men
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalize emotions. You know, this different logic and compartmentalizing emotions plays a big role. Men ask questions: Why did this happen? They are trying to figure out how to fix it. Now, this is grief, and it's
Yeah.
not something you can fix. It happens suddenly, and we have to go through the emotions. We have to go through the process. All right, we should
Yeah.
be able to understand that. We should ask ourselves, how are we responding to this loss? How are we? What do I feel as a man about this? This is very important. The second thing I want to talk about is there is this big elephant in the room called shame. All right, and shame
Mm-hmm.
could fall under the second stage of grief, or in any other, but a stage of grief called anger. You know, we should be able to deal with this big elephant in the room when it comes to men called shame, because it got to do with emotions. You know, men tend to they're not used to expressing their emotions. They're not used to talking about stuff. They want to express. It's okay, all right, to express their emotions as a man. When it comes to grief, you lost someone who is very important. You are dealing with something bigger than what you thought. You are unprepared for that. You know, it happens so fast. You know, it's very
Mm-hmm.
painful. You know, as I mentioned before, I cannot understand the pain which Justin and Giddeon went through when they lost, their child and their children, when they lost their children. And the fact is, we grieve differently. But we have to understand as men that emotions are okay. It's okay to express your emotion. All right. If somebody comes to me and is expecting me to suck it up, hold it, or take it easy, and I will not. You know, I cry on the shoulder of my wife sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, and it's okay. And she cries on
Mm-hmm.
my shoulder sometimes when she's overwhelmed, and I feel that release, and it's good. It's fine. I get out there and I'm stronger, and I get going. I do what I got to do because we confront many things in life. It is okay for men to cry. And we just
Yeah.
begin to walk away from this cultural concept of human behavior pertaining to men, and we've discovered that it's not working for our best. Because when we do not understand that, we begin to have a poor emotional and social quotient. Emotional and
Mm-hmm.
social very important. You know, how we interact with people and how we deal with things after such a traumatic event has occurred. Another thing I would like to mention, yeah, another thing I would like to mention is that you are not alone. No, you're not alone. There's always somebody around you. There's somebody who cares. There's somebody who understands. At that point, I've spoken to a lot of my patients, and they were very happy and they were very comforted by the fact that there was someone who was feeling their pain. In the African community, that's huge because when you lose someone who cooks up in your house, it brings to cook food and stuff like that, you're not alone. It makes that burden easy, you know. But besides that, I want to say we should talk about it. Talk about it. Men should talk about it. Men don't talk. Everything all right? Yeah, everything all right. You know, we should talk about it. Grief is something you're going through. I mentioned before, men react to grief by thinking and acting. Women cry, women talk about it, women shout about it. So we think a lot and we act a lot, but we need to talk more. Talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation with somebody. Just say something. It doesn't matter what you have to say, just say something. Don't sit quiet. Don't withdraw yourself to such a place because it's past that body is being fought. Before we know it, we begin to cope with the things that we're not supposed to cope with in order to
Mm-hmm.
accept what has happened. It's a big community, you know. Yeah, we can cope with that. So, and I want to ask just to mention before, men grieve too. It's not just women, you know. So there is that social model which was drawn in an African model I do not know if it exists in other places where if somebody we lose someone, the woman should be the one seen crying or
Mm-hmm.
comfort, and men grieve too. And once they understand that we grieve as well, it is very
Yeah.
for the men. That's what makes a man strong. All right, men grieve too.
Yeah.
Just women, we all grieve. We all need to be comforted. I need a hug too, not just the woman. It's a very important process. I need that hug so bad, just like you do. But I don't want to be macho about it and see what to hug. I'm like, no, it's all right, I got it. No, I don't have it. It's something that we're talking about. It's about the mind, and we don't want to get into prolonged grief. We don't want to have complications of grief, but it's okay to grieve, all right? And I just want to encourage us about that. I want to applaud Giddeon and Justin for being so strong in the face of such adversity. Something that was so sudden, something that was so unexpected. It's not something that we hope for. It's not something we wish for. But how both of you have been able to cope about this and come out and talk about it to encourage other men and other women who are out there who are facing the same situation, who might have faced the same situation, or who might be facing the same situation in future. It is really huge, and it's really important for you to be able to do that. I really thank you for that. And I just want to say that it's been such a blessing to contribute to this part again once more, Clarice. And I hope that many have gained from this experience. Thank you. Thank you.
Where's the host?
Yeah, it looks like we lost our stuff.
Yeah, we seem to be having quite a few issues with the internet.
Okay.
I've had to switch from the Wi-Fi to my director.
Yeah, Clarice she'll be back. Clarice will be back. She'll be back.
The coronavirus.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
It put a lot of strain on the network.
Yeah, it's a lot.
COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, Dr. Ako, for the information you've shared, and I think it's helpful, and also I think people out there to listening to it. As you rightly say, oh, she's
Hi
not.
guys, sorry, my phone overheated and the phone went off. Thank you so much for staying
Okay.
on. Oh God, thank you. Yeah, my phone was too hot, so it went off completely. Thank you so much for staying on. So, and final word, Giddeon.
My final word is really to say thank you to Dr. Ako, Justin, and the host, for enabling us to share our experiences, which I personally think are useful because it gives us an opportunity to think about what we went through, but also to offer help to people who may or are going through situations like ours. As Dr. Ako said before, it's helped me to realize the importance of sharing, but also recognizing and accepting that I have to grieve differently, and that is useful when I'm dealing with someone else who is grieving, because I wouldn't be expecting or prescribing to them, but just being there to support if them in any way they might want me to. So it's really been an honor.
Thank you so much. I thank you so much, guys. And just to revisit some of the things, some of the important things which have been said, it is as our men grieve, let's recognize that they are grieving. Let's recognize that they are part of the process, starting from the medical professional, starting right from the hospital. They have to be acknowledged. Just their presence needs to be acknowledged as well. And also, we as family members, as friends, we also have to know that they are grieving and that they grieve in their own way. It's unfortunately that sometimes the woman may grieve. The pain may be so overbearing that sometimes she forgets those around her, or she unintentionally ignores those around her because she's overwhelmed with the pain. But I usually say that experience is what we gain when we didn't get what we wanted. So even if we never have this experience of losing a child the second time, there are people out there who are losing children every day. So if you've had this experience as a dad, as a mom, as a parent, and you have a friend who has experienced the loss of a child, talk to them, use your experience and help them. But at the same time, you also have to recognize that they may want to grieve in their own way, they may want to talk in their own time. And we also have to know that grief, especially prolonged grief, has a devastating effect on our mental and our physical health. And that's why sometimes when someone has grief for a very long time, they may end up getting depressed. They actually lose some form of self-confidence, which as well may be in the form of feeling worthless, losing their self-esteem, depending on the circumstances of the loss. And again, some of the things that people, friends, families, people around you say to you, maybe, especially when it happens, for example, our baby was born very premature, and if it happens several times, then people will say, "Oh, why should she go through this all the time? Why are they going through this all the time?" Then at some point, you start thinking that maybe there's something I did, maybe there's something that my family did that is now affecting me. But at the same time, we cannot really tell why some families go to experience the loss of a child. But when that happens, we allow ourselves to go through these emotions. We learn through our emotions. But one thing for sure is to not suppress your emotions. Go through them, no matter how painful they are. Yes, if it's denial, yeah, you deny. There were times where I actually thought that little man was going to get up at some point and just smile. There was a time I actually wished he could have blinked. I could have gone in his place, but it is not my doing. So I'm really grateful that our men came up today, that you guys came up today and gave a voice to this topic. It's very necessary. And if you are watching and you are a man, learn from experience, because experience is what you will not read in any textbook. Experience is not any degree or any PhD that you will get from any university. It's hands on. Because they usually say that the pain that we feel, nobody else will feel that pain because we know exactly where it hurts. So just to round up, I would just like to say that yes, we know that men are conditioned to repress their emotions. Often, what lies beneath even what is on the surface. Men who learn to open up and share their grief will have many benefits to their emotional and physical health, as well as for their relationships and their marriage. They will also feel more energy and more happy. So I hope this is a starting point for us to talk about issues like this, not only about bereavement or grief, but about so many other topics which often people consider them too emotional, too sensitive, or taboo topics not to talk about in public. But what we give a voice to has the power to heal us and change lives out there. I just want to appreciate everyone watching. There is Susie Lemons, one of our sisters. There's Ivy Bingwa. Thank you guys so much for all your comments. And thank you to my people for always educating. You're welcome, Ivy. And thank you so much for watching and contributing. And our sister Susie, she said, thanks guys. Our African men should be encouraged to express their emotions and not suppress them. Prolonged unexpressed feelings might lead to depression. Definitely right. You are perfectly correct. And so we come to the end of our show. And let's continue giving a voice to all these issues. Let's continue raising awareness. Let's continue educating, empowering, inspiring, and giving hope to all those who are experiencing one form of challenge or the other in their lives. It's a happy weekend to all of you, and thank you so much for honoring our invite. Stay blessed, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.